Robert Yusi, Director, Warren County Probation. Brian?
Brian Pulaski, Assistant Public Defender.
Ashton, owner of the Lotus Group of Companies.
Diana Palmer, Third Ward Councilperson in Glens Falls.
Connie Bossy, private citizen, Glens Falls, New York.
Marty Delorier, private citizen, Queensboro, New York. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming this morning. Item number 2 on our agenda are discussion items. I will start with number 1, overview of responsibilities of Board of Ethics, and turn it over to County Administrator Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Yusi. Appreciate it. Thank you for agreeing to be the temporary chair here while we sort out business. I'd just like to go quickly through the responsibilities of the Ethics Board, and much of the agenda today is it just touches on what's in the Ethics Code. So just to rehash that, who are the Ethics Board members? So 3 of you are the appointees to the Ethics Board. That is Mr. Anand is the municipal appointee. Mr. Yusi is the county employee appointee, and Ms. Bassi is the member of public appointee. There are also 3 alternates in each of those categories. And for county employees, Brian Pulaski, for municipal, Diana Palmer, and for public is Marty. I never say your name right.
Delorier.
Okay, thank you. The Board of Supervisors appoints both members and alternates, and the restriction on membership on this board is that you shall not be an officer, official, or committee person of a political party or hold any similar office or title in a political party. I just want to give the county attorney an opportunity to jump in here if there's any point that he would like to make at this juncture, and if not, I'll move on.
I'm all set for now, but I'm sure I'll jump in. I guess even though this may feel a little formal, it is being broadcast live because it is an open meeting, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. I think the intention is really to have more of an informal conversation just to help everyone acclimate and understand a little bit more about the responsibilities and duties that you've agreed to undertake in your new roles as members of the Ethics Board.
I'll go through a few of, thank you, Larry. I'll go through a few of the specific tasks that are assigned to this board under the Ethics Code. One of them is to render advisory opinions with respect to Article 18 of the General Municipal Law, as well as this code. Another is to make recommendations with respect to the drafting and adoption of this code of ethics or amendments to this code of ethics upon the request of the Board of Supervisors. That's something that happens a minimum of once every 2 years. You can accept from the general public or any of your own members a complaint or allegation of conflict of interest or violation of this code. You can initiate an investigation upon your own motion or upon receipt of a sworn complaint alleging a violation. You also, that's, I think that's all I had on my list from that particular section. You can also, I have to flip to a different area of the ethics code now. You can also, in the case of a person serving in an elective office, that person, if they file a disclosure with the county attorney as to a potential conflict of interest, that disclosure is also provided to the Board of Ethics for a proactive review and a consultation if a conflict does exist. And that's to be done within 60 days of that notice being filed by the elected official. There is also provision in the Ethics Code for the Board of Ethics to enforce filing requirements for annual financial disclosures and for certifications that every county official, officers, and employees have taken the annual ethics training. So the responsibility for enforcing those filing requirements fall to this board. The next piece I wanted to highlight is the responsibilities that you all have as individuals, which is to also take the annual ethics training and to also file annual financial disclosures. And that wraps up everything I wanted to touch on under responsibilities of the board.
Any questions with respect to number one? Item number two, discussion regarding election of officers. Again, County Administrator Moore.
There are no provisions in the ethics code for how this board organizes itself. There are a number of areas and I'll reference a couple of them, where the ethics code leaves it open for the members of this board to adopt your own rules as to how you conduct your business. This is a quote from it. When you render advisory opinions pursuant to written requests for the same, you will do so under such rules and regulations as the Board of Ethics may prescribe. And it's also mentioned the Board of Ethics, this is a more generic provision. The Board of Ethics may establish such rules and policies that may be necessary for the proper discharge of its duties and may utilize the services of the Office of the Warren County Attorney. So that's where we wanted to head here is if you want to organize your board with officers, that's the conversation we wanted to open up today.
And as your legal advisor under the rules that have been promulgated, I would recommend that you do organize and select a chair. There's 3 members who are present today who are active members. So it would really be a vote by those 3 members, not by the alternates, as to who the chair should be for the coming, well, for this term, because your term it does expire December 31st of 2021, but that would then permit us to move forward with other business today for the committee. I don't know if the chair wants to open up any motions to nominate any individuals, or if any individual wants to maybe nominate themselves, given that there's only a pool of 3. I'm not opposed to either doing short straws or picking from a hat too, but that would be up to the board to decide.
Well, Bob, is this something you would like to do?
There'd be nothing more I'd like to do better.
Well, the only reason I put myself, I'm retired, so you have a full-time job, Ash. I know you run a very extensive business. So I have a dog and a wife, so that's pretty much it. So my question is, if you would like to do it, we would support you. I'm happy to do it if you would not. And Ash?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Absolutely.
I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it. If you have the time and you feel the interest, then I would defer to you.
All right, well, with my other members are comfortable with that?
I agree.
All in favor?
Hi.
So moved. If I have the power.
How are you, you're gonna, you're the, so I'm the new chair, is that the school?
County Attorney Elman, so with respect to the other officers, we should go forward with that also today, right?
But what I'd recommend is that the committee also select a vice chair in the absence of the chairperson. And then by default, the 3rd member would be the 3rd chair or 3rd chair in the absence, because there is the possibility that 2 alternates and only 1 member could constitute a board for purposes of taking action.
I'm happy to be the vice chair. If everybody's agreeable.
Agreed?
Sure. Thank you.
You want to take a vote on that?
Take a vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Any nays? Thank you. So we have 1 more officer, correct? Larry? By default, that would be,
The
Yeah.
remaining 3rd member of the board, which I believe is Mr. Anand.
Yes.
So by default, you would be the chairperson in the absence of Ms. Bossy or Mr. Yusi for a meeting.
Sounds good.
We don't need to vote on that.
That's the easy one. Thank you.
It looks-
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving along,
Well, since we now have the official chair, if Mr. Yusi would like,
I will turn it over to our official chair.
Okay, shall I sit right here? Or where would you like me to sit? Does this work for everybody?
as chairperson, you can sit wherever you'd like to.
Wow, now that's a lot of power if I ever heard. So reading this, I'm assuming that we're actually going to have county, that we're going to have Mr. Moore really lead us through what this is. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. Why
I've
don't you?
read this, but I need to have your brilliant.
Sure, Madam Chair, if you want to work us through the agenda items as we begin and finish them, you can defer to the county attorney and I to fill in any substance.
Okay, so let's then move on to item number 3 today, which is the overview of the annual ethics training program, and I will defer to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Then the one piece that I missed, I did go through how each of you are sort of paired up in your categories. So it's whenever you're unavailable, or if you yourself have a conflict with something that's been asked to be done, that's when you coordinate with your alternate and make sure that the other one can handle it in your stead. Turning over to an overview of the annual ethics training program. This is all contained in section 14 of the ethics code, the very end of section 14. All Warren County officers and employees shall take a computerized ethics training course. This training provides guidance regarding your outside activities while under county employment, and a certificate of this training shall be filed with your supervisor annually, no later than January 31st, or if you're a new employee, within 10 days of your employment. So this will be an ongoing thing that we're going to always have filed. And the way we've decided to organize this is the IT department has a portal. It's called KnowBe4, where we take IT training. And the IT department has set up a training that Tammy DiLorenzo from my office recorded and drafted with the help of many people in this room. That's the training that for now will be the training. It's about a 20-minute video. The system to track this is automated. So all of you as members of the ethics board have a county email address, and all employees as well as all supervisors will have a county email address. I think the IT department is in the final stages of setting all of that up. And the KnowBe4 system will communicate with a county email address, but not an email address with a different extension. That was why it was important that we get everybody with an address. So the KnowBe4 system will notify everybody that is required to take the training of that responsibility. And it'll continue to notify, and it'll start to pester you if the month of January rolls along and you haven't completed the training. The IT department will have a complete record of everybody who does complete the training. When you complete the training, it'll generate a certificate of completion. So for county employees, they can send those to their supervisor as stated in the ethics code. Members of the ethics board can send it to the clerk of the board of supervisors, Amanda Allen. I think that wraps up my Tammy, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, let me see. No, I don't think so. And I think Ryan hit on this. The IT department has the ability to monitor completion of the training. So they can run a report and they'll know by department who has not taken the training so that they can monitor compliance. You have to complete the entire course or the certificate will not be generated. We did some testing on that. And again, it's just about a 20-minute training. So be looking for that email. Again, it's going to go through your Warren County email, not your home email, is where you're going to get the prompt to take that training. And I believe that's it.
So Tammy, can I ask you for clarification? What is the role of the ethics board in meeting that compliance? Is it you and Ryan are watching who's finished that, or is it the ethics board responsible for getting everybody to get that done?
You will, in the policy, it does talk about you getting, as an ethics board, they'll be reporting, the IT department who will report who has taken the training, who has not. I believe that first round goes to the county attorney's office, if I'm not mistaken, according to the policy.
Yeah, Larry, and
Correct.
we've, later on in the agenda, we have the item of setting a meeting dates, and we can choose meeting dates in a manner that allows us to give timely reports as to who's filed by the timeframes and who hasn't, so that they can be addressed in accordance with the ethics code.
Okay, so we'll have our meetings, we'll see who has not complied. The board, does the board have the authority of adjudication, or is it just information sharing with the county officials? We're going back to Mr. Moore, we're going back to the county attorney saying the following people have not complied. Our role is informing you of that, correct? You have the report, but I'm just making sure we know what we're supposed to do with that information.
Yeah, but during this first year, as we kind of flesh through the process, one of the recommendations that my office will most likely make is that we assist in following up with reports that have not been received. My office is not responsible for and is not going to play an active role in reviewing what's filed. That's going to be up to the members of the committee to determine if it's a sufficient filing. But as far as the very clear, was there even a submission? We'll be able to provide that information to the board, and then the board would, I would suspect, direct my office to reach out to follow up with individuals who failed to file within the time frame provided, which is really the month of January.
All right, thank you for the
Each year.
clarification. Anything further on the ethics training?
I just have a quick question. So has this been an issue in the past, or this is not a big deal?
This is the first year in which we've had the annual ethics training requirements, so that's why I mentioned the IT department's finishing up the addresses and the communications. So typically what we've had is the annual disclosure, and I believe the annual financial disclosures historically were due at the end of March. That date has been moved up to the end of January. So the timing on the one and the existence of the other are both new.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
And just to follow up with the training, being a department head, the way we do it is we instruct our people to do the training, give them a time period, get your certificate and report and give it back to us. So hopefully before that information, you know, there's a catch-all that you can look over and see what employees didn't do it and then follow up with them. So not that everything's perfect, but hopefully there shouldn't be too many.
And Chairwoman, over here, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairwoman. One of the changes that we made was to make the form a little bit shorter in recognition of the fact that so many employees do need to fill it out. And we're hoping that by doing that and being more proactive about following up on who is and is not completing these forms and filing them, that we'll do a better job making sure that all of the county employees are filling out the forms and have that in advance to the county attorney's office or the Board of Ethics, however we're going to sort that out.
And the good news is it's electronic, right? So everybody's going to do that online. And I'm assuming they'll do it during their work hours. Is that correct? So you'll give them time to do that.
That's correct.
And because we have this new training, hopefully people, you know, it'll be in the forefront of their minds right away that they need to do this.
Sound point. Any other questions for about the training that anyone has? Okay, are we ready to move on?
Chairwoman,
Seaver.
I also think that for consideration for your Board of Ethics this year and making those recommendations to the board on where there may be possible deficiencies, one thing we had hoped to do with the training was to provide it to be an interactive training that would have questions and a certification at the end. We were not able to reach that goal. We were able to model a lot of it off of the New York State training, but we weren't able to do the Q&A because the county doesn't have the proper software to do an interactive kind of quiz. That's something our IT department is looking into. So as you think about recommendations, that training can be enhanced for next year as you see appropriate. But at this point in time, it is just that PowerPoint and a read through and an acknowledgement that they've done it, which is more than we've ever done, which is exciting.
So there's no test at the end. It says
Not yet. Not until you guys make a determination on whether or not it needs to be there, but there should be a certificate, which will be very exciting.
Oh, very
And
exciting. Yeah.
And now, for the first time ever, every single person being paid by Warren County or appointed by Warren County will have an email. And that will help not only with FOIL requirements, but certainly in the training requirement, of the Board of Ethics. So thank you again.
Any other questions or issues that people would like to bring up about the training? All right, we're going to move on then to item number 4, the overview of annual statement of financial disclosure process. Again, I defer to Mr. Moore for that discussion. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've turned to Section 7 of the Ethics Code, which outlines the annual disclosure. It's fairly detailed. There is a list in Appendix A of officials and employees who must file the form. That is not to say that it is an exclusive list. There are criteria outlined in Section 7 annual disclosure that states the types of individuals, it's policymakers primarily, who have to file. The Board of Supervisors all have to file. The members of the Board of Ethics, as I mentioned, all have to file. Appendix B of the Ethics Code is the actual form. And as was previously mentioned, I think by Supervisor Bramer, the form was updated this year by the Board of Supervisors, shortened a little bit. And the idea of the form is that it all ties back into what's in the Ethics Code. So that the Ethics Code basically outlines the ethical expectations that this government has of its officers and employees. And then the questions that are asked on the ethics form are meant to tie back into those expectations, so that as you're filling out the form, you use the Ethics Code as your guide. The timetable, I'm flipping to the very, let me start here. The Board of Ethics, this is in paragraph 1 of Section 7. The Board of Ethics shall enforce such filing requirements. These ethics financial filing forms, as I mentioned, are due at the end of the month of January. And the Board of Ethics shall have the authority to review the annual disclosure statements and shall do so within 60 days of the filing due date. So 60 days after January 31st. Or as needed to determine questions that arise under this law. I'll flip to the very end of Section 7 now to highlight a little bit more about how these are filed. The annual disclosure statements shall be filed with the Office of the County Attorney no later than the 31st of January each year. This filing may be completed electronically or in hard copy as a fillable form, with a copy of the certification of completion of the Warren County Ethics Training. So the annual training, when the employee files their financial disclosure, they also make sure that they filed the certificate that they've completed their training. A complete list of those filings shall be provided to Board of Ethics members by February 14th of each year. Late or missing submissions shall be followed up on by the Board of Ethics with the assistance of the County Attorney's Office. And after 90 days, my office is notified, as well as the Board of Supervisors is notified if we still have any stragglers, which hopefully we won't by then.
So to clarify, in terms of the actual form itself, is this an electronic form that people receive via an email link?
This
They
is,
will fill this out electronically?
so it's Appendix B, if folks want to actually physically fill it out, print it out and fill it out. And I believe we have, Tammy stepped out, but I believe we have a fillable PDF form as well that will be sent out to those who have to fill it out.
Okay, so they'll fill it out, and then we review it, and we monitor who has completed this, and then we always have a paper copy that goes back to the county attorney. Is that correct?
I think that's a correct statement. I think practically my office will assist in monitoring who has complied, especially from the Schedule A list. It's a little more difficult to track compliance with employees who are not listed on Schedule A and may be more discretionary.
Okay.
Largely, that's going to be a role, I believe, met and satisfied by the various department heads identifying who in their departments are not on Schedule A, but still have a requirement to file.
Based on what's in the code.
Correct. Yeah, I'm very focused on what's in the four corners of the code, what's provided for, what the wording is, and what my interpretation is as far as a recommendation to the board of your role, your responsibilities, and the process and or procedures provided for in the code for you to get that accomplished. Yeah.
So the follow-up question I had when I looked at this form was, are there instructions? So for example, under the financial interest, I looked at that. I was not clear whether all my 401ks and all that stuff belonged on here, or was it only investments that relate to Warren County?
I do not have an answer to that. I am not aware of anything in the policy that sets forth definitions. I kind of defer, this policy was enacted before I was county attorney. So I do defer to the chairs for personnel and for the board.
Ms. Bramer? can you
Well, that was
clarify
one of the things that we tried to shorten on the form because it was so lengthy and it seemed to have questions that didn't really relate to conflicts about our county work and county, financial interests. So if it's not spelled out clearly, maybe that's something the Board of Ethics could do as some sort of instruction sheet about what you do and do not need to put down. But no, the goal was not to include things like our 401k, because people were putting down like, they would send in pages of the interests held by their, mutual funds in corporations all over the world. Like that, what does that have to do with our financial interest and anything having to do with Warren County? So yeah, my intent was that type of thing would not need to be reported
Right,
to
exactly.
cut down on, the reporting requirements. And also it was kind of invasive
Mhm.
to be telling,
Very.
Yeah,
and potentially to have those forms foiled
right.
so that anyone, anywhere, not just
Yeah.
Warren County, anyone could have that information, which didn't seem right. And it didn't
Right.
seem to be getting at the crux of what we're trying to do with the ethics code and the ethics board. So if that isn't clear, yeah, maybe if it's not addressed already in the training, yeah, Ryan, sorry, please, I'm rambling now.
With permission from the chair. The question on investments on the annual disclosure form is parsed out. If the final clause of the initial sentence says, if such investment is with a business or other entity involved with the county or any municipality within Warren County. And this gets to the point I was trying to make earlier about how all the questions on this ethics form tie back into the ethics code.
Okay.
And the area of the ethics code that deals with investments in conflict with official duties is section 10. So that's kind of our hope, is that people utilize the ethics code as they fill out the financial disclosure form.
And just as a follow-up question, so one aspect of it is the completion of the disclosures. Is there any process set forth for what's in those disclosures, and are they acceptable, or any kind of compliance check with those? Or anything that would be a red flag? Where does that go and happen?
The best answer I have for that is the piece of section 7 that I read from that says the Board of Ethics shall have the authority to review the annual disclosure statements and shall do so within 60 days of the filing due date and as needed to determine questions that may arise. And that passage, I think, needs to be read in conjunction with the passage later on in the policy stating that you have the ability to adopt rules and regulations to ensure the discharge of your duties.
That makes sense, because, if we don't have a process of compliance check, then I think, it falls back on us to look at that information and then act on further decisions.
I don't know. So Ash, you're really clarifying what happens if we review the form and have a question.
Or
Does
if,
that question go?
yeah, sort of, or if there's a non-compliance in terms of what was disclosed, is it, to be further looked into, or what,
Or just inform.
yes.
So what I hear Mr. Moore saying is that it's going to be up to the Ethics Council to answer that question. Ash, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, we just need to sort of look at, some kind of reporting structure to understand that better, but I think, yeah, the process will work.
One of the key pieces which we will be addressing in a large view, not a micro view, but a macro view, is what kind of rules the board wants to have moving forward. And starting that process of my office making some recommendations on a set of written rules that this board can review and adopt going forward. That's not something we're going to do today, but we can, when we hit the point in the agenda, have a general conversation about what those rules may look like for how the board will operate during the course of the year.
I'd find that very helpful. Thank you. Okay, any other questions from anybody regarding the statement of financial disclosure form or process? Yes, please.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. I'm Gene Merlino, Supervisor, Town of Lake Luzerne. My question might be odd, but I'm going to ask it. I'm one of the good old boys. I've been around here 16 years. Every year we fill these things out. I was always under the assumption that they got sealed and put in the office, but now they're going to be opened and read and checked out. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think they're going to be read by the Ethics Council.
That's what I mean, yeah.
So it's sworn to confidentiality. The three of us are sworn not to share it with anybody.
Mhm.
And then my assumption is we give it to the county attorney and or Mr. Moore, who keep it the same way they used to.
Right, but my point is they are going to be opened and read by your team. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Seaver.
Thank you, Chairwoman. One of the comptroller's reports that we had spent a lot of time on this year reviewing indicated that one of the red flags they saw were reports, financial filings that were sealed and thrown in a filing cabinet and never looked at. How do you then determine if someone has a conflict? And then how do you advise your clients, from Warren County? How do they advise them about potential conflicts of interest and recusal and abstentions? So they were very concerned about the policies and procedures versus what was actually on the form. And so great lengths were taken this year over a course of about 8 months to look at these forms and say, just identify the areas where there could be a potential conflict or a conflict, and it's specific questions derived to elicit those responses. And the idea being that there is a separate body, this Board of Ethics, who will review them and then also provide those individuals that have to file them with some advice. And so I think it's been incredible improvements, but it is, as Supervisor Merlino points out, very different from what we have done. But it is in compliance with what the recommendations have been from the state. So again, thank you. You have your work cut out for you.
Thank you for sharing that. Ms. Bramer.
Thank you, Chairwoman. The other thing to keep in mind, even though they sat in the cabinets and were sealed in the past, they were always subject to FOIL. So even though our county attorney wasn't ever reviewing them and the Board of Ethics wasn't reviewing them, people from the public could FOIL them, and they were opened and they were sent to members of the public, which is still going to be available for people.
You know if they've ever been foiled?
I've been foiled multiple times since I became a supervisor only a few years ago. I haven't been here 16 years. Maybe Gene never had his foil, but I have. And I know other supervisors have. And one of the questions on there is like the names of my children and like, why do I need to put that out there? My children are under 18, they don't have any employment with the county. They're not making money, kind of thing. Anyway.
Understood.
Thank you.
Mr. Merlino, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And go ahead.
Madam Chair, just a couple, comments that I like Supervisor Merlino also wondered what happened, when you filed them, you put them away, and I didn't know that they could be just foiled. So that's good to know. And having done a few of these in my life myself, when I look at the investment part, I read this clearly to say it's different than it was in past years, that it's only Warren County as opposed to listing all the assets you have regarding those things. So that, I think, having done them, it clarifies that it should be pretty simple, hopefully.
Well, the other thing I read in the financial is you're not giving an amount. You're just saying, I own a piece of this business in Warren County, and you're not saying how much it is, or it's basically just telling us that it exists, not how much. Is that correct? So that kind of information is not public or can't be foiled.
Chairwoman, to answer your question, that is correct. Our acting county attorney at the time had made the point that whether you owned, 10%, 60%, 5%, the point is, if it's a conflict and it's with Warren County, it's a conflict. And so he had suggested modeling a lot of it off of the state and also reflecting just, okay, you have a conflict, you need to disclose it and then get the appropriate advice. So that was from Robert Twilliger when we were looking at all this.
Bramer?
And again, this is to help us ensure compliance. It's not to catch anyone in anything. It's so that you and the Board of Ethics can then say to a supervisor, okay, you've identified this, you own this business. If there is ever a contract between Warren County and that business, you need to recuse yourself in advance. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see this as a gotcha process in any.
Right.
That's not what it's about. So let's be really clear that all the board members understand.
Chairwoman, if I may, just to make sure it's super, super clear on that issue of a business interest, it's a business interest that has some connection or involvement with the county. So if ABC Corp, if you have some share or interest in ABC Corporation, but it has no interplay or connection with the Warren County government, that's not something that needs to be disclosed. It's those businesses or entities. So I'm a lawyer. If I had an interest in a law firm that was conducting business with Warren County, I would need to disclose that because that would potentially, clearly would create some conflict of interest on my part that the board should be aware of, that I should be aware of and disclose, and that would impact my ability to do my job. So I just provide that as kind of an example.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, issues? Yes.
I think to probably lighten the mood and make sure that everybody feels as if we're not trying to dig into, everybody's 529s for their kids and things of that nature. I think the goal is fraud. I think that's that's what the ethics board is looking for, is any sort of fraud that's being committed by a county employee or an individual in those statements and things of that nature. I think that it's good that it's not as invasive. I think that people have a right to have certain types of privacy, but also ethically, it's important that we collaboratively can see if there's fraud being committed by anybody that has ties to the county.
And Madam Chair, I think that's a good point. And if the philosophy of the ethics code is fairly simple, is that if you're using your official position to get yourself or an entity or a relative or something that you have a close interest, if you're using your position in order to gain a material benefit for that individual or yourself or your entity, then that's a violation of the ethics code. Alternatively, if that's basically what it boils down to.
Understood. Anybody else? Any questions, issues you'd like to bring up before we close this discussion talk? Thank you very much. Moving on to number 6, review of outside interest form. And again, I defer to Mr. Moore. Or to our county attorney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief on this one. The outside interest form is covered under Section 11, Paragraph B. If a Warren County officer or employee or immediate family member is currently or plans to be in the future an employee, board member, consultant, owner, contractor, or even a passive investor of an entity that engages in any business or maintains any relationship with Warren County, provides to or receives from Warren County any client referrals or competes with Warren County, they must fill out an outside interest form in the office of the Warren County attorney, and a copy of that completed form must also be provided to the Board of Ethics.
And that's Appendix C.
That's
everyone?
Appendix C, correct. So that's just, there's what that form looks like. And again, to the point that I just made is if there's a potential for yourself or your entity or your relative to have a material benefit from something that is before you at the county, that triggers a disclosure.
Now, I'm also making the assumption here that an outside interest form is on the honor system, correct? That you're a member of the Warren County community and that you're going to do this, so that you're on the honor system to say, I'm going to fill out this outside interest.
Yeah, the impetus is on the person who makes the disclosure to make their disclosure.
Okay, questions about the outside interest form or the process for that, or anything that anybody'd like clarity on?
Just
Chairman Bieber.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Just to point out that this form had been one that I think wasn't regularly utilized. In the training this year, we've highlighted, and I'm sure Ms. DiLorenzo can tell you how that was highlighted in the training, but it brought attention to the outside interest form. So the employees know, even if you're not filling out the financial filing for the annual form, you have an obligation to fill out the outside interest form should circumstances arise throughout the year. Even anyone as supervisors or appointed to positions, your financial situation may change throughout the year where now you do have a contract with someone and it's related to the county, or you take a job, or your whatever's required on that form. So that outside interest form is on the honor system of telling everyone that throughout the year, if it changes, you've got to fill out this form. And I think that's something that has just, it's been attached with the filing form. People would actually send it back with their filing form, not recognizing that that's something you keep and you send in later. So that has really been highlighted on the training that every employee will have to take. So it gets confusing with the two different forms, but that was a best practices from New York that had said it was really important to keep that part. So that's why it's there.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or issues around the outside interest form? Everybody clear and moving forward? All right, moving on to the rules for the ethics board. Okay, let's hear it. We would love to know what the rules are there. No, how can we move this forward in terms of, we certainly know within the document what the rules are. Are we talking about additional rules to the document here?
Let me start with rules that are outside the policy that apply to the board.
Okay. Thank you.
So first, there are some requirements, as I mentioned before, regarding New York State's open meeting law, which is why this is a public meeting and currently viewable by the public should they wish to watch. Each of your meetings will be a public meeting. The meeting is defined as anytime there's a quorum of members present and they're discussing the business of the board. Fortunately or unfortunately, with 3 members, any 2 members would constitute a quorum. So I do want to, as the legal advisor, just make note for each of the primary board members and any of the alternate members, should they be acting as a primary member, that 2 of you having a conversation on the phone about ethics matters would constitute a quorum and would be subject to open meetings. So to the degree that there's process or procedural questions that need to be addressed, my office can assist in that. But any discussions regarding the content of the code or actions that fall under the authority of this board should be limited to meetings that are held publicly. Public meetings need to be published in advance. The policy for the county is 72 hours notice. The open meetings law requires a minimum of 24 hours notice. Currently, due to COVID-19, remote access by video teleconference is permitted. That may change at some point in the future. I imagine we all hope it does change at some point in the future because there won't be a need for it. So those are the main pieces on open meetings and why, when you conduct business, it needs to be in an open forum. There's one substantial exception to that, and that's what's called executive sessions. And executive sessions are when a majority vote of the total membership, which would be 2 out of 3 members, approving a motion to go into executive session. There's a specific list of items which qualify for discussion in executive session, and I'll provide that information to you or the future board in 2022 to assist in understanding that.
So what
So-
so you're going to let us know what qualifies for us to go into it.
I'll provide some guidance to the board to assist to the degree that the primary board members are unfamiliar with open meetings law. I know at least, I suspect at least one alternate is familiar with open meetings law
Mhm.
currently.
So I'd like a qualification for that because we're going to be reviewing forms. So do we then do these forms in an open session like this? Or, see, to me, that's where the conflict is going to come. Do we say, we're now reviewing this form from so-and-so and we're looking at it, it looks fine to us, check the box?
As the legal advisor, I cannot tell you that you must or should. The presumption is that as much information will be kept open as possible. However, an example of reviewing individual financial disclosure forms would most likely qualify under one of the exceptions
For exec session.
for an executive session, but that would be a determination that the board would have to make. I would anticipate my office making a recommendation that that review does occur in executive session because of the sensitive nature of the information that's going to be reviewed and or discussed. But the process and procedure that the board decides to use in reviewing the disclosure forms that are submitted is something that's still open for discussion with the board. So big picture, open meetings law is there. There's going to be, primarily there's three roles that the board plays. One is there could be a request for an advisory opinion, as the county administrator Moore mentioned. The discussions regarding that opinion and what that advisory opinion is would potentially be the subject of executive session. The second role is recommending changes to the existing code. As you start using it, you may or may not see provisions or portions that could be refined, deleted, amended, or added. That would not necessarily be an executive session matter, but it is one of the three core roles. And then the third role is really receiving complaints for review and possible investigation, or generating out of the board a complaint for review and possible investigation. And I say possible investigation primarily because just because there's a document that's submitted that is called a complaint and lays forth conduct, that does not necessarily mean that the conduct in that complaint falls under the purview of this board, or is conduct that would be investigated by this board. So, the scope of what this board is authorized to review and investigate in the form of complaints is limited to
Ethics.
conflicts of interest under the ethics policy and alleged violations of the code, which is the ethics policy.
All right, so my understanding is you will provide, as county attorney, you will provide with us some guidelines before we move forward. I think certainly the open meeting is clear, but you will then provide the three of us your recommendations for what those would be.
That's correct. Let me clarify that a little bit, and it kind of jumps to something I wanted to add to the agenda. The current term for this board, and as the legal advisor for the board, I do obviously advise you that it ends with the term of the supervisors that appointed the board, which is December 31st of 2021. So I guess I asked the chair and the membership whether any member would like to make a motion to refer to the Personnel Committee a request that the current primary members and alternate members are all willing and interested in serving a further term for 2022, for a 2-year term that would begin in 2022 and then expire December 31st, 2023. So stated differently, does this board wish to have a motion before it that would ask the Personnel Committee to make a further referral to reappoint the current primary members and alternate members whose terms currently are expiring December 31st, 2021. You know, as the legal advisor, I would let you know that that decision is a decision that would be made by the incoming Board of Supervisors. Hopefully that would occur in January. And I'll be fairly clear that given that this is the first year for this policy, that the timetable of this policy has requirements that are much tighter and shorter than the prior policy that I've reviewed. My hope would be that the incoming board would be able to fix the membership of this board as early in January as possible. So the board would be able to be sworn in and start the process of the work that's before them as soon in 2022 as possible. Very long. I apologize. That's probably one of
I think
my,
all of us on the board are asking the same question.
yeah. But so I guess as the legal advisor, I'd ask the primary members if any member would be interested in making a motion. And the motion would be a simple motion to refer to the Personnel Committee the request that the primary and alternate members would be reappointed by the new incoming board in January of 2022.
You're talking Board of Supervisors, not Ethics Council.
Yeah, the Board of Supervisors in January of 2022, because it will be a new board as of January 1st.
That's Chairwoman, yeah.
Frank.
We do have a Personnel Committee meeting afterwards, so if you do make a recommendation to us, we can take it up this afternoon.
So I'm trying to be clear.
I
So
guess the
rec-
suggestion that the county attorney is making is that you guys say to us as Personnel Committee, put forward a resolution to the full board, which would be in 2022, reappointing the current slate of members of the Board of Ethics.
Right, so you're asking that of the Ethics Council to the Personnel Committee.
Yeah,
This is not this is not BOS to BOS, this is Ethics to Board of Supervisors.
yeah.
Well, this is a request by this Board of Ethics to the Personnel Committee that is going to meet today, that the Personnel Committee consider a further request to the Board of Supervisors to reappoint the current slate of officers.
Got it. Because you keep using the word board, I hear supervisors, so I see Ethics Council, you said, so. But we're-
One of the things we can discuss in 2022 is the nomenclature
Yeah,
that's provided for in the policy, but it is referred to as a Board of Ethics.
Board of Ethics.
I do agree can be confused.
Okay, gotcha. So I would ask before we do that, for the primary members, which is Bob, Ash, and myself, are we comfortable moving forward for 2022?
Yes, for me.
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Okay, and for our alternate members, that's Brian, Diana, and Martin. Is everybody comfortable?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, Madam Chair.
So therefore, I support a resolution going to the Board of Personnel for the Board of Supervisors that this board, Ethics Council Board, whatever, it goes forward in perpetuity in 2022 to 2023, and that election go forward with the new Board of Supervisors.
I would ask, is any other primary member going to second that motion by the chair?
I'll second the motion.
And then if the chair would have a
All
vote,
those in favor?
Aye.
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 So therefore, so resolved. Does that meet your criteria?
Okay, I will add that to my agenda right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's appreciated. Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman,
Yes, please.
Thank you. I want to give you a round of applause, but I think it's inappropriate during a meeting, but please know that's very exciting to see that resolution come forth. But also that the law, and of course our county attorney can speak to this, that once in front of the full board of supervisors and voted on, it's for the term of the board. So I know it would be 2022 and 2023. And as you review this law and you find deficiencies, and of course the policy will have some, one of those areas may be addressing what happens at the end of a year. We'll be talking about those issues later on multiple other fronts, but it doesn't really give, it ends up with a whole month where we'd be without a board of ethics, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So if you wouldn't mind checking that off on when you guys review the policy on how to fix that little bit of a loophole or lapse, that would be very
But you're
helpful.
right, the forms are in January, so if we don't exist, they're gonna.
Right. Right. So I don't know if it's just going, like the LDC, the members go till March, and then they have the reorganization meeting in March. That's an idea. But
Would you put LDC meeting? LDC.
I'm sorry, the Local Development Corporation.
Thank you.
And that is one that members are appointed to that by the chair of the board. The difference here is that the law requires the full board make the appointments to your positions. But it may be a timing issue where you want to look at how other appointments are made. And I'm sure our county attorney can provide counsel for that.
Any other issues or questions regarding the rules for our ethics council? Diana?
Yes. I'd like to ask a clarifying question about the role of the alternates. So I'm understanding that we do not vote or we're not considered part of the quorum unless acting as a primary member. But is it the intention of the board that the alternates participate in all of the reviews and the meetings, even if we are not acting as a primary member, or do we do that only if the primary member has had to recuse themselves?
Should be, right?
I think that's an excellent question, and it's a difficult question to ask. When I review the policy, and I try to review strictly, meaning in a very conservative as far as what the words on the page mean. To me, it appears, number one, that each alternate can only replace their linked alternate based on the position that the primary alternate have. So you could not have two, a primary and an alternate who are both private citizens constituting two of the three members of the board, as the policy is written. That's my interpretation and that's my recommendation. As always, it's up to the individuals who are either appointed or elected to accept or reject that recommendation. As far as attendance at meetings, your question comes just as I was going to go over kind of a calendar of events so we could work in towards the flow of meetings where I would kind of address that in a more general way, which in part is me punting the more difficult question of what active role can an alternate play when all three primaries were present, or when an alternate is properly seated in the right seat out of the three, what role would the other two alternates play? My recommendation today is that all alternates should come if they're available to the meetings. What role they're going to play is something I think we would have to flesh out at those future meetings. The policy does say that the board would meet, the Board of Ethics would meet a minimum of 2 times a year. I envision at a minimum a recommendation of at least 3 meetings on an annual basis. Of course, there could be more. The calendar that's set forth by the policy basically creates a 31-day open period, kind of like I almost think of it as like the open enrollment for health insurance. It's the open filing period from January 1st to January 31st for anybody everybody who has to do the training. Number 2, anyone who has to file a disclosure statement during that 31-day period. So the recommendation I have is that there would be some first meeting on an annual basis of the board that first week of February into the second week of February. there is a requirement in the policy that by February 14th, by Valentine's Day, there's a list of filers or non-filers recognized or understood by the board. For practical reasons, it would be helpful not to do that meeting on the 14th, but to give my office time sometime from February 1st to get that information to present, and then to follow up and do something with that information after the board meets. So I would anticipate that the ethics board would have a first meeting sometime towards the end of the first week, beginning of the second week of February. And then potentially, because there's a 60-day requirement to review all filings, my hope would be that there would be a second meeting in early March, while the board would have until the end of March to ensure that any filings that were late would be reviewed within the 60-day window. My expectation is that the vast majority or overwhelming majority of filers will timely file, and those can be reviewed at what would be a rather substantial first meeting of the year in February, picking up any late submissions in early to mid-March of the year. Of course, the board may find that the review process or what they deem they need to do it in their role with those filings requires more meetings. That would be a minimum that I would recommend, given that we haven't gone through the process before. And then the third meeting really would be at the, and it does say at the request of the Board of Supervisors, that the board in maybe May or early June take a look at the code for modifications, changes, amendments that, based on the experience they've had to date, they feel would assist the code going forward. And the timing of that would be in May or June would be very helpful, because it would give my office the opportunity to then assist in presenting those changes to the appropriate committee, and time mid-year for the Board of Supervisors to consider whether or not modifications to the local law and the resolution are appropriate.
So Diana, is your question answered?
I was gonna say, oh, Ben, wait, Ben.
Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you, Chairwoman, and congratulations again. Maybe a hypothetical question, but wouldn't it be wise to have the alternates at those meetings? Hypothetically, you have an agenda with 10 items, and standing committee member A needs to recluse themselves from two of the items on the agenda. Would their appropriate alternate be able to vote on those just two particular items, and then go back to being an alternate for the remaining 8?
Supervisor, if I can respond to that. So
Please.
Supervisor Driscoll, I think that's exactly correct. That's why I think attendance would be helpful and important. It's just a question of what active role, the question was really what active role that alternate would play. I'm trying to prevent myself from telling my Little League story of how I sat on the bench. And the coach would always tell me to pay attention because you never know when you're going to go in.
Yeah.
And I never would pay attention. Then when I would go in, I wouldn't know what's going on. But for that reason, it kind of has stuck with me through life. And hopefully I pay attention when I'm on the bench now.
Well,
So,
as chair, I support that the alternates be part of this process. Absolutely. I think that that's critical, because they are there. And what I'm hearing is, when it comes to voting, we have 3 primary people that we will vote as appropriate unless we were have to be recused, But I think it's important that the alternates be a major part of this, because any of our primary people may have something that during the year happens to them, God forbid, have to step out. You want that alternate to be able to step in as quickly as possible. So Diana, my answer to your question is, I would hope the alternates would be very involved with this.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the alternates would attend, be informed, keep up to date, but not necessarily participate in the discussion unless called upon to be a replacement for a primary member? Is that correct?
I think it's a work in progress here, but as I see it, as I, just one quickie, as I see it, for example, reviewing the forms, and I think I'm going back to Mr. Molino's comment, we want to make sure that those forms are a very small group of people because we have to respect confidentiality in doing that. So as Bob, Ash, and I look at those forms, the assumption is the alternates would not see those forms, correct? In terms of the conflict of interest form, outside interest form, same thing, that we're looking at that. When it comes to meeting and voting, so for example, here's an example. When we go through in April and May or June to look at this document to see where we might want to change it, that's certainly something we would want the alternates to look at. It may be that the 3 primary people vote, take it forward to the personnel going on to the board of supervisors. But I think their inclusion is very important for all 3. Is that correct, Mr. Driscoll?
Yeah, no, I was just going to, thank you. I was just going to say, I think I would value their opinions.
Yes,
And, 6 opinions, obviously to me is better than just 3.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, about Mrs. Kramer.
Thank you. I don't have anything further to add on that topic. I think you guys have hit it, and I hope you will all the alternates be involved as much as you can to stay up to space. The other thing which you just said about referrals to the personnel committee, that isn't clearly set out in the existing law. So I don't know if the county attorney would have some legal advice as to whether or not a motion needs to be made to say that you would refer to personnel, or if that's just kind of understood, or if we actually have to make a change to the ethics law, which would require us jumping through the hoops of amending the law again with the whole public hearing process and all of that. Chair, well, I know that's not really on the agenda, but maybe it is under the rule, discussion regarding rules for your operations.
County attorney, you-
And I apologize, I was preparing for the next step of my
so
agenda.
your rule, so your Little League ruled and. I'm sorry. I digress. I'm sorry.
Chair Bossy, that was very appropriate. I appreciate it. So if you could just repeat what
The question is whether or not the board of ethics or ethics members need to address whether or not there needs to be something in writing about referrals to the personnel committee or a change to the ethics law itself that says that the Board of Ethics reports to the personnel committee, or maybe in your legal opinion, it actually goes straight to the Board of Supervisors.
it's one of the issues that the board's going to have to determine based on the 4 corners of the policy that's in place. Because
You mean the Board of Supervisors?
I'm sorry, the Board of Ethics.
Oh,
The Board of Ethics is going to need to determine based on the policy that the Board of Supervisors enacted. Local Law 6 of 2021, what action they take and to whom referrals are made when they complete their work on any of those 3 core topics. Some of them, I believe, are addressed by the policy, some are not. But that's going to be part of the procedural rules. I think the board has to determine, to the degree that it's not specifically stated by the policy that was enacted by the Board of Supervisors, it's left to the Board of Ethics to establish the rules and policies that are necessary to discharge their duties on the Ethics Board. So it's something I'm very well aware of. It's an issue that goes beyond the ethics policy.
okay, so it is not clearly spelled out, and you're suggesting the ethics members should suggest something.
I'm suggesting it's something that the Board of Ethics has to look at to determine what they do when they, for example, reach a conclusion on a complaint that there was a violation of the policy. What is, or the code, what does the code say is their next step?
Okay, understood. That's clear as mud. Good.
Yeah, so that's clearly our going forward. That's an important part of what we're doing.
It's going to be part of the rules and procedures that my office makes recommendations to the board on in January or February, whenever that first meeting occurs.
All right,
So-
any other discussion on the rules for the ethics board? Everybody, Supervisor Strong.
Yeah, thank you. Madam Chair, I think having the experience in municipal government for as long as I have, there will be people who want to use you for political purposes. Now, one way of avoiding that is to set up a procedure that follows state law. The open meetings law says that for generic, everyday business, you're not talking about any particular individuals or any particular accusation. You have to remain in open session, and the public has a chance to be there and so forth. However, if you're going to talk about a particular person and a particular accusation, then you can go into executive session. And Article 7, 105 gives you reasons for going into executive session. And in your reasons, I would suggest that you don't name the particular individual. They have a right to confidence. They may not even be guilty of what the person's charging them with, because the person is looking for newspaper headlines and charges. Now, if upon your investigation, you do have findings, then it will come to the Board of Supervisors and so forth, and that will be discussed publicly. But for the purposes of trying to be used politically, because in many cases, there may not be any findings to the accusation. The attempt by the individual is just to embarrass somebody, that you can avoid doing that by setting up a process. And yes, you do have to keep minutes even in executive session, but they don't have to be released to the public only until the time that you find that there's findings and you hand it to the next level. But that's something you can talk about. And I suggest you do talk about your organization.
Sure.
Fran.
Thank you. I completely agree with Supervisor Straugh. I think that's a very valid point that we keep confidentiality, and this, there are other policies in the county where we have certain procedures set up so that there is a reporting in executive session to the Personnel Committee. And then the Personnel Committee is given this report, whether only if there are findings made. So I would offer that as a suggestion, that is a way to report, report it up to the next level, is that it goes through the Personnel Committee as a finding that has been made by the Board of Ethics, not simply these possibly unfounded complaints. They don't need to be reported up to anyone. And I would suggest even as simply as the ARPA committee, our American Rescue Fund plans, we have a separate committee that they are making recommendations about how to use that money. And that gets reported up through the Economic Growth Committee. That's obviously not as touchy, but I think that would be a good way to set up the procedure going forward.
Thank
Yes.
Anybody else have a comment on our rules, procedures, processes? Everybody heard from?
I just, so we've discussed, the policies, the procedures, the law. Many of them definitely would need changing as we, move forward in terms of processes in place. Should that be priority in terms of making sure the policies are in line with, state law or the laws laid out by Warren County already? So we are not jumping around hoops to make sure we're in line, just as a item that I think was important for us to tackle. And that also resolves the questions about the escalations to the legal department or to, your office or to the other committees that needed. So would you recommend that is something we look at, some of the policies that may have changed from last year to this year? Just like, Mr. Moore mentioned about the IT policies changing about the email addresses. I don't know if that is public knowledge. I don't know if that is in law in effect. And how does that or how transparent is that towards the law that we're working with today, the policies?
Okay. As I understand your question, I'll let you know that my office has already prepared a rough draft of some proposed rules and guidance for the Board of Ethics to operate under. It's been composed based on state law, as well as referencing some rules and policies used by other boards of ethics for other counties in New York State. It is not in any way, shape, or form prepared for release, as it is a rough draft. For example, and this might be a good segue for me, one initial question under that category of complaints is when there is a complaint that's received, and the County of Warren has received 7 documents which refer to themselves as ethics complaints. The initial question always is the content of that document content that's covered by the policy, by the ethics code, or is it something other than and outside the ethics code? And what policy or procedure does the board want to use and adopt for that initial determination of whether a document that's received that states it's an ethics complaint falls within the purview of the committee or not? And I'd actually like to, and I'd recommend if the chair is willing to open that up for discussion among the primary members. And I can always offer a recommendation on a process or procedure that can be, that my office can suggest going forward to deal with complaints that are received, processing those complaints so that they're acknowledged, that the Board of Ethics is aware of them, and there can be some quick determination on if any action at all needs to be taken on them. If they're outside the policy, arguably no action would need to be taken. If they're inside the policy, moving forward to establish or set up a meeting to address that complaint.
So are you saying that we would deal with that today?
I would suggest that we come up with a policy for that initial phase of looking at a document that claims to be an ethics complaint and how the board wants to handle that. And then based on that policy, we may wish to go into an executive session to address a number of documents the county has already received which claim to be ethics complaints. So the committee and executive session can determine what action, if any, to take on those complaints or those documents.
So now, as of today, who makes the determination of whether it's an ethics issue? Is it your office?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. My office can make a recommendation, but my office has no authority under the policy to decide what is inside or outside the scope of the code, of the ethics code. My recommendation for purposes of a discussion would arguably be that my office does an initial review. And if there's a clear indication that the allegations or claims are not covered by the ethics code, that there's some quick mechanism that the committee agrees on or the Board of Ethics agrees on, such as the chairperson would receive it and be able to accept or reject the recommendation of the county attorney as to whether that is something that requires the full board to review. Otherwise, every time a document comes in that claims to be an ethics complaint, but may not be, I'm being very careful with my language because it's not my job to tell the board what is and is not a ethics complaint. It's the job of the board to make that determination. I'm merely trying to assist the board in coming up with a process, a procedure to kind of winnow down documents that are received by the county that the board determines whether that's the chairperson or a fully constituted board, that a particular document is not something that the board's going to take any action on because it's outside the scope. There is nothing provided in the code of ethics to assist the board in that process or procedure. Therefore, I believe it falls under section 20, subparagraph D, that says the Board of Ethics may establish such rules and policies that it may be necessary for the proper discharge of its duties. That's a provision I will repeat again and again as we move forward together in fleshing out how the board will handle their duties and responsibilities.
So what I think I hear you saying is that today, the three primary members should vote to support your recommendation that the county attorney's office do initial review, certainly starting with those 8 forms, that you would like our approval today to move forward in that process. Is that correct?
I'm not asking the Board of Ethics to support my recommendation. I only offer my recommendation as a recommendation. And whatever discussion the Board of Ethics wishes to engage in, and whatever decision they wish to make is theirs to make. Again, I'm going to be very cautious in my role, which is merely the legal advisor to the board. At the end of the day, it's the Board of Ethics that must make determinations on how they operate and what decisions they make on matters that come before it.
Thanks. So what I'm trying to get clarity on is what we're doing today in this first meeting versus what we will do in our, should we be reappointed? Clarify that. Should this board be reappointed, that would be something we would take up at our first meeting.
Yes,
Ms.
Madam
Brandt.
Chairman, thank you. I think what the county attorney is not saying, which I feel like I can say since I'm not your legal advisor, is that there should be some process that you set up today because there's already 8 of these sitting there. What can he, what should happen with them? I think vote from the Board of Ethics members saying that the county attorney's office can conduct an initial review and sort of winnow out the ones that are within the scope of the policy and those that aren't. However, I mean, it would be my suggestion too, that you put something in there that says, even if the county attorney makes a determination that something is outside the scope, that you board members still have the opportunity to review whatever it was, if you so desire, in case you would like to make a different determination as to applicability, that initial applicability.
Correct. And it's really hearing from the county attorney's office what was recommended, that we see both sides. We see the
Yeah.
things that are recommended and not.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so fellow board members, Bob, what's your take on this recommendation that the county attorney review those forms as appropriate to come to the ethics board?
So what I'm hearing is there's 2 issues. What's the procedure initially going forward with the county attorney receiving these and how he wants to disseminate it? Does it go to the chair in the board members to look at it, which I think is a good idea. And then the second one is there's already 7 or 8 outstanding complaints that come that we should be advised of today, and the Board of Ethics should make a decision, which we may have to go into executive committee to hear that information. So I'm supportive of both of those.
Thank you, Ash.
Yes, and this is going back to our policies and procedures question, where I think the sooner we establish those, the better it is for clarity purposes. And I think, from a legal advice perspective, once we get recommendations, we can add those to our policies as to what will the process be going forward. So I think we should definitely try and tackle these 8 that are outstanding right away with recommendations.
Okay, so I'd like to take a vote for the 3 of us on the recommendation that going forward, that the county attorney, the county attorney's office will make recommendations of what ethics, what of those forms come to our council, number 1. Number 2, that today we review the 8 that are currently there in executive session and adjudicate those today because they are immediate. Rob, your vote.
I second the motion.
Second the motion. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye. So county attorney that's what we're going to recommend going forward today. We will look at all 8 of those forms in executive session. I don't really know how we're going to do executive session. We have to go in a room somewhere, I'm assuming.
We'll take care of that in a second, but
Oh.
let me just clarify for purposes of executive session. What we're addressing are 7 complaints. I'm not going to provide the name of the complainant, but the date of the 7, the first one is September 17, 2020. 2021.
Okay.
The second is September 18th, 2021. The third is September 27th, 2021. The fourth is October 6th, 2021. The fifth was October 19th, 2021. The sixth was October 19th, 2021. Number 5 was dated in the AM. Number 6 was dated in the PM on October 19th. And number 7 was also dated October 19th, 2021 at 8:24 PM. Those would be the 7 documents that my office received for which we would be looking to provide to the Board of Ethics, and as it would address potentially matters regarding appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person. I would ask the committee to consider reviewing those 7 documents in executive session. And then that would be something that there should be a motion for, that would be seconded, and then a vote for purposes of going into executive session.
Can I ask one of my fellow board members to make that motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Super, thank you.
Can I just have one last question, Mr. Elvin?
And you are live on YouTube.
Thank you very much. We are back. The executive council is back from their executive session. As chair, I would like to make a motion, and I would like to read that motion. And here we go. All documents which allege a violation of the Code of Ethics shall be initially reviewed by the county attorney and forwarded to the chairperson for the Board of Ethics to determine one of the 3 following. Number 1, that whether the first determination, whether the chair has a conflict, number 1. Number 2, whether the document states a complaint under the code and will be referred to the Board of Election. And number 3, whether no action shall be taken on the document. So moved. May I have a second?
Just to clarify, that for referral to the full Board of Ethics.
I'm sorry, for referral to the full Board of Ethics as amended. Do you have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so now I'm going to defer to our county attorney for the adjudication of the 7 issues that we dealt with.
I was asked by the chair to make a public record of what actions were taken in executive session regarding the first document received by the county dated September 17, 2021 at 6:03 PM. There was a vote by the board to take no further action on that document. For document 2, dated September 18, 2021 at 2:38 PM, the vote of the Board of Ethics was to take no further action on that document. Document 3, dated September 27, 2021 at 10:51 AM. There was a vote by the Board of Ethics to take no further action on that document. Document number 4, which was dated October 6, 2021 at 11:16 a.m. There was a vote of the board to take no further action on that document. Document 5, which was dated October 19, 2021 at 10:57 a.m. There was a vote by the Board of Ethics to take no further action on that document. Document 6, dated October 19, 2021 at 7:59 p.m. There was a vote by the Board of Ethics to take no further action on that document. Regarding document 7, the chairperson of the board recused herself and left the executive session. The vice chair, Robert Lucy, became the acting chair. There was, for that document, document 7 was dated October 19, 2021 at 8:24 p.m. And the vote of the Board of Ethics was to take no further action on that document. I would ask the chairperson, Chairperson Bossy, whether I accurately stated the actions taken for documents 1 through 6.
Yes, you did.
And for document 7, acting chairperson Lucy, did I state the actions of the board correctly?
That's correct.
Thank you. Moving along in the agenda, number 7 is to set future meeting dates, which we will not be doing until, should we be appointed again, we will do it at that time. The next action is privilege of the floor, and what I would like to open is, are there any public comments for the Ethics Council today? Any public comments? Going once.
Chairwoman,
Yes.
I just, from over here, thank you, Chairwoman. I just have one more clarifying question to the, did you come to any consensus about reporting any issues to the Personnel Committee? Is that,
We did not discuss.
okay. Is that coming up further in discussion of rules of the board next month, I guess?
I believe my recommendation on that, which I don't want to speak for the board, was to address that with the board that's constituted in 2022.
Very well, thank you.
Chairman Seaver?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Just following up on that note, the ARPA committee, the American Rescue Plan Act, was created to report through the economic and higher education, or no, not higher, the Economic and Growth Committee. And so that's why we, unfortunately, within the documents, there just wasn't a committee assigned to the Board of Ethics. And it may very well be that you decide to report through the full board, but there were questions on whether or not resolutions could be passed to the full board in such a manner, or if we still had to follow the committee structure. So just for your pending items moving forward, that would be one of the concerns. But I just wanted to, again, thank you for your time today, your commitment for volunteering and for your professionalism and the way you've handled all these very sensitive matters in front of you today, and your commitment to Warren County. It's very much appreciated, and we're very proud to have you part of Warren County.
Thank you, Chairman Seaver. Now moving along, I would like to ask a motion to adjourn. May I have one of my members do that? Mr. Uzi, second. All those in favor of a motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The board